If you can find your seats, we'll get started. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to East Islip. My name is Gigi Giuliano. I have 3 school-age children, and I'm a strong believer in public education. I would like to thank Superintendent Mr. John Dolan for attending tonight's educational forum, and for the support of the East Islip Board of Ed, PTA Council, and the entire community. It is with great pleasure that I present to you this esteemed panel of educators, parents, and advocates that will inform and inspire us to make the right decision for our children. Our panel includes Dr. David Gamberg, Superintendent of Southold and Greenport School District. He has been a superintendent in Southold for the last 8 years, and before that he served as the Assistant Super for Curriculum and Instruction in the Patchogue Medford School District. An educator for 30 years, he has also been an elementary school principal and taught in both New York and California. Mrs. Beth Domino, she's a teacher and president of the Port Jefferson Station Teachers Association. Mrs. Marla Kilfoyle, teacher, parent, advocate, and founder of BATS, which is the Badass Teachers. It's a national group with over 56,000 members. East Islip's own Bonnie Buckley, parent, teacher, and outspoken special ed advocate. She's on her way. She's actually next door at the ECC. And last but not least, Jeanette Duderman, parent, founder of Long Island Opt-Out with more than 24,000 members, and a member of NYSEG, which is New York State Allies for Public Education. For the past few years, public education has been under the assault of corporate reformers and out-of-touch politicians. The grassroots opt-out movement has empowered parents to take our classrooms back, and the newly appointed Chancellor of Regents, Betty Rosa, has given us new hope in putting the focus back on the well-being of children. This informational forum is intended to give the public accurate information and answer any questions that the audience may have tonight. Index cards will be passed around, but since we have just a lovely, intimate group, I think you can stand and raise your hands. But first, I would like to invite our superintendent, Mr. John Dolan, to say a few words.
Gigi, thank you very much. And how about a nice round of applause, because Gigi was the driving force behind this tonight. You know, it's interesting, as you know, I've moved into this phase of my career, it's an interesting situation to be a first-year superintendent and deal with this situation. And it's nice. I haven't met the other panelists, I just met them briefly, but I do have some history with Mr. Gamberg, and I'll explain. It's an intimate history, I'll explain in a minute. But Dave and I were talking before, and really, when you see injustice in the world and you speak up, that's what being a true hero is. I think we're getting the politicians' attention. You folks, with your hard work, are getting the politicians' attention. And you're right, corporate America is trying to reach into our pocket. What we need for kids is some sort of healthy diagnostic testing so we can guide them towards their future. You know, I don't think anybody in the room will disagree that when you go to school, I mean, life is about challenges, and tests are simply challenges if they're good, healthy tests designed by professional educators. And I've been saying, you know, you folks did all the heavy lifting, but as superintendent, what I would support is opting into something good and healthy for kids. Something where the professional educators design tests, just like when you go to the doctor and they take your blood pressure, or they give you a blood test. Find out what our patients need so the teachers can deliver that through the instruction. And in talking to Dave, you know, we're starting to move, because as a high school principal, I was upset. This really didn't touch high schools, and what I would hear from kids is, hey, Dolan, can I opt out? And I'd say, opt out? What do you mean opt out? Go to class. And remember, you know, kids get to high school and they've heard this term, and they want to opt out of class, they want to opt out of regents, they want to opt out of responsibility, and that started to scare me. But I know what you're going to hear from Dave Gamberg is we are starting to turn the conversation to opting in. What are we going to opt into? And the professional educators, with the support of parents and school officials, are going to find good things to opt into. So it's time now to turn it over. And I do have a personal secret now, a challenge for Dave Gamberg at the end of his presentation. Dave's going to do a great job, and you're going to learn a lot. But my wife has a huge crush on Dave Gamberg. She came home the first day, and she had a huge crush on him. It's all I heard about Dave Gamberg. This, Dave Gamberg, he cares about kids. My wife is a teacher. This guy came out of the district office, and all I heard about Dave Gamberg, this, Dave Gamberg, loves kids, great guy, and he's cute too. And I met Dave Gamberg, and you know what? I developed a crush on Dave Gamberg too, because he loves kids, he believes in kids. At the end of this presentation, Dave, I want to know, who do you love more, me or T? And if you don't make this public, Dave, I can't support you in anything, because I want to know. But without further ado, let's bring Dave Gamberg up with a nice round of applause.
Thank you, John. I think everybody can hear me. I'll use my teacher voice. Is that okay? Just in case there's a little technical issue here. This is going to take about a minute to warm up. But actually, it's interesting because part of my bio that was read by Gigi includes my work in the Patchogue-Medford School District. Can you hear me in the back? More or less, you're more than welcome to move a little closer. I won't fight anything, just so you know. But I will continue to talk loud in the interest of making sure that everybody can hear me. So let me just cue up my presentation. Okay. So I worked with John's wife T back in Patchogue-Medford a number of years ago, and the reference to loving kids and doing things for kids and keeping kids first, we hear about it a lot. At least we should hear about it a lot. You know, I would like to think that that is something that anybody who gets to know me knows that that is first and foremost. That is what I navigate by. That's my compass, my internal compass. So, you know, the issue of opting out and opting into something, I think it's critical. The what is absolutely critical. I am not suggesting opting into a better test, although I do understand John's point about using blood pressure tests and blood tests, that none of us who want to be healthy want to completely opt out of those tests forever, because it would not be wise. But I'd like to take it a step further, and I want to make reference to something that myself and a number of my colleagues, last summer we were at lunch and we were thinking about where are we traveling in these issues that we face as educators. Joe Rella, Mike Hines, Steve Cohn, and myself, we got together and we decided that, at least for me, and what this represents, is what's worth fighting for, okay? That question became an essential question as I began the school year in my home school districts. I posed that to the teachers. And in order to answer that question, I believe that we have to establish, why is there something worth fighting for? And the second part of that is equally important, which is to continue to express gratitude. Because despite everything else, we have a whole lot to be grateful for. I walked into this auditorium and I think, my God, what a beautiful space. I can only imagine the kind of productions, what goes on here, the learning that takes place, because of this wonderful infrastructure, and the teachers that support the musicals, the performances, the concerts. We have a lot to be grateful for. So we begin with this notion of the public school. Horace Mann said the public school is the greatest discovery made by man. And that is worth fighting for. Public education. I believe it's essential to establish, why is the brick and mortar school in 2016 something worth fighting for? And if you follow the news over recent years, you saw a whole series of articles. I just grabbed a couple of them. Headlines like the Region saying testing rules unfair for special needs kids. There was a map that showed student poverty has increased since the Great Recession. Is there a future for public education? And finally, empty plate. Kids are being bullied to skip lunch at school. This is just a sample of the kind of headlines, of the kinds of issues that we've been thrust against in education. This summer, I came across an article that talked about Amazon. Now, true confession, I do use Amazon, although I do try to keep it at a minimum, because I learned of the culture in Amazon. This article actually goes back to 2011. the article over 2015, in August of 2015, I'll show you in a minute, but inside Amazon's warehouse. And it was quoted as saying the following. During summer heat waves, Amazon arranged to have paramedics parked in ambulances outside, ready to treat any workers who dehydrated or suffered other forms of heat stress. Those who couldn't quickly cool off and return to work were sent home or taken out in stretchers and wheelchairs and transported to area hospitals. Now there's a connection between this kind of corporate approach and what's going on in education. Again, I confess that I'm not anti-Amazon, but I am cautious given what I learned. Now there's a corollary to this, which says that they say that children wetting their pants while prepping for tests and taking the test. They say the schools keep a supply of clean clothes for these incidents. That's a discussion about children taking high-stakes tests. Do you see the correlation? Those who push for that and the remedy for it will just prepare stretchers or extra clothes. That's the nexus. So now fast forward to August of 2015. Inside Amazon, wrestling big ideas in a bruising workplace. Substitute workplace, school place, okay? The real issue Amazon's work culture raises is how disposable are people? How disposable are teachers? How disposable are people in work, teachers in schools? That is the question that we're forced to face. The question Amazon's culture raises is whether it is an outlier or whether it represents the future of the workplace, the future of the schoolhouse. Does, in fact, high-stakes testing, computerized testing, dispensing with teachers, getting rid of them, is that the future of education or not? So it brings us to this question of what's worth fighting for. And this image, the next one that you're about to see, for me, it epitomizes what's worth fighting for. It's the idea that public education is planting seeds for the future. The physical garden. You can have a garden on a computer screen. It's not the same as a garden that children get to touch. Okay? I remember when this garden, you can see more images of, was first started. I brought Regent Tillis right there. There was no garden. High-stakes testing was coming on board. And I say, but for the fact that we are determined to start a garden here, many people would say, we don't have time for that. We have to worry about the test. We can't bring children outside. We have to prep them for the test. You'll see what the garden became. Something that speaks to the heart of what education should be for all kids is represented in the National Honor Society. Scholarship, leadership, service, and character. That is what public education is about. That is something we should afford all kids. Yes, some kids rise to the top. They get to be in the National Honor Society. But all of those components are the kinds of things that we should provide focus on for every kid that we serve. One of the big pillars in my mind that should be at the heart of any good education is authentic engagement. So what is authentic engagement? This is an image of a robotics team from South Pole. They just got back from Ohio, by the way, yesterday. They traveled to Ohio to compete. And the kinds of things that happen, for those that don't know it, some of you might, in robotics, it's the integration of literacy, science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts in performance-based tasks that require students to identify and solve problems. That's the kind of education that predated Common Core. It was before Common Core this was happening. And it's still happening. Not because of Common Core, maybe in spite of it. Okay? It's certainly in spite of the high-stakes testing that these kids have to be in the shop building a robot till 11 o'clock at night for days upon days upon days. Because I see it firsthand. Here's another example. I noticed as I was coming up to the middle school, there's a river right nearby. So substitute a river with the Long Island Sound. Engage students in the study of environmental and global issues. What you see here are images representative of where I'm superintendent, but they can be anywhere in America. They could be in the desert. They could be in the middle of the city. It doesn't matter. Authenticity is what matters. We need time to apply what we learn in class. It's one thing to answer multiple choice questions and know the structure, the basic idea of a triangle. It's another thing to apply it in real life. What you see here is the image of a shed being built in the service of that garden. That shed is now completed, and it holds all the tools that the students need in order to tend the garden properly. It's an example of teamwork. A vital skill in the 21st century workplace. A vital skill as someone who lives in a community to know how to work with others, to fix polluted groundwater. You name the issue. Whatever issue we face, teamwork is going to be at the core of being successful at that. And the teacher, in a supportive role, is critical. We can't have teacher as adversary. We can't have teacher as being concerned with test scores. We need the teacher to be able to be supportive of the novice student, to give girls an opportunity to experience this kind of learning. What's worth fighting for? For me, it's representative, not in a circle, but an appreciation for the arts. That's worth fighting for, in my opinion. For every school, not just certain schools, not private schools, not just wealthy schools, all schools. You want to do something with the millions of dollars in testing and all the time that you've sucked, taking me and the teachers away from what we should be doing? That's time is money. Spend it on the arts. So, even though we're a very small school district, we have less than 1,000 kids K through 12. The community is wise enough to invest in an orchestra program. Students perform outdoors, indoors, elementary school, middle school, high school. That's the way it should be. Albert Einstein once said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Couldn't agree more. Those are students doing art outside in the garden. A beautiful space to create art. Another opportunity for kids to explore. He could be writing scientific data, he could be writing poetry. You don't know what's going on in his mind, but he's exploring. Another student is dreaming, just by the sensory of being able to be around that. It's vitally important to maintain a community of learners. You don't do that with students constantly going when the bell rings, sitting before desks where they're preparing the test. Okay? You've got to change the paradigm. Vitally important today to create a culture of inquiry. It's not enough to get the right answer, it's knowing how to ask the right questions. That's absolutely critical. There are thousands, millions, maybe billions of answers through Google and any number of search platforms. Do you know the right question to ask? You need time to practice that. Teachers need time to model that. We need to create a culture in which students become stakeholders in their community. Whether it's in ROTC, where they serve the community, thousands of hours worth of service every single year among the students who are participating in that. Attend to the social and emotional well-being of all stakeholders within a learning community. This is a representation of how you do that as a class, as a community of learners. So, what's worth fighting for? Again, I ask. How about being joyful as we learn? A simple notion represented in this picture. Vitally important. That you will not, what's the expression that Rousseau once said? You will only make sensible adults if you begin by making playful children. And speaking of play, play is the highest form of research. Couldn't agree more. I think a lot of schools have dispensed with sandboxes. We've actually added sandboxes to our playscape. In a moment, I want to tell you a quick story, a crazy idea that I had while I was jogging about our playscape. Be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Jeanette. William Shakespeare. Of course, that's the Addams Family, but you get the idea. They just did a phenomenal production of Mary Poppins. It was Broadway quality. It was they even had the flying apparatus. It was great. It was amazing. Just went on Friday night out in Southall. All worlds a stage, including our very own outdoor amphitheater, which was built by a graduate, donated to the school district, and we're going to have Shakespeare in the Park perform there this spring. The elements of the sandbox, the garden, and the amphitheater make up the magical playscape in Southall. So I'm out there jogging, and I had this idea. It just started about a year and a half ago. this TV production course, right? Where the kids do the news stories every week. It's amazing. East Islip has it, right? No?
I know that school does.
Not every school does, but we started it in cutting-edge equipment, Apple Macs, the top-of-the-line editing software. Anyway, I'm out there jogging, and I thought, drone. Let's get a drone, and we'll actually, the reason why I thought of this, you can do drone photography, aerial photography. I want to have all the kids, I'm going to go to the elementary school, I'm going to bring them all into the auditorium, and I'm going to explain, boys and girls, you're going to just play like you normally do. Do not look up in the sky when this thing is flying around. Why? I want to add to that playscape. You saw what I told you, right? The sandbox, the amphitheater, and the, what was the other one? The garden, right? I want a 20-foot Mother Goose shoe sculpture. Costs between $20,000 and $40,000. My son, who's an architect, did some research, and he found out a company in New Jersey that can make it. I want to take this aerial drone footage of the kids playing, embed it into a 5-minute marketing film, and send it out to Ellen DeGeneres, among others, to try to get funds. How's that for a crazy idea? Come on! The kids will read fairy tales by the Mother Goose shoe. Larger than life. It's great. Anyway. These are kids performing at the dedication of the amphitheater. Teachers performing. There's a garden in the background. So what else is worth fighting for? Something we can all relate to. The concept of school spirit. Right? It takes shape in every single school in America, I dare say. Right? Even small schools and small school districts with only a few teams, some of our teams are shared, we still have a lot of school spirit. Right? But this is the kind of stuff that at times we unfortunately have to face the fork in the road and say, can we sustain this in light of the financial pressures, the academic pressures? We can succumb to that. Finally, I leave you with a few images of gratitude, because for me, this is so vitally important. I am so grateful for the opportunity to work where I work, even among scenes like this. Absolutely beautiful. You can find beauty anywhere. As I said, whether it's the desert, in the city, anywhere there is beauty. And it's extremely important, I think, to sustain our energy, to remain grateful for what we have. Thank you very much. I do want to apologize in advance that I'm going to have to be leaving at this point. I don't know if there's a question or two or not. You can just go right ahead.
No, I want to thank you very much for coming all the way out and giving us this presentation. Thank you. And I have to say, in East Islip, we do have great, we call it EI Pride, go Redmond. Our next speaker is a mom and a grandma. She's an 8th grade science teacher, and she's the Port Jefferson Station Teachers Association president. And she's also the chair of the NICET Stronger Together Caucus. Please give a warm welcome to my friend, Beth Domino.
What he said. Really, honestly, I think that's, whoa. I don't think I need this. I think that's why we're all here. A really strange thing happened around 4 years ago. I started to notice that the tests that we were giving in 8th grade were much different than the tests that were ever given before. And my superintendent and I started teaching together. So we had this kind of unique relationship. And so I went into his office and I said, I got a bad feeling about this Joe Rella, that guy. I got a bad feeling about this, Joe. I just don't feel good about these tests. I don't know what it is. I can't really put my finger on it. Everybody thinks I'm crazy. I don't have a good feeling about this. My youngest son actually took the first 4th grade test that was given a bajillion years ago. He was class of 2007. So he took the first 4th grade test that was ever given. Nobody paid any attention to these tests. Nobody. Of course, the school sent home a letter. They're going to take tests tomorrow, make sure they have a good breakfast and some pencils that are sharpened. And everybody was like, okay, cool, no problem. I mean, I graduated from a New York high school. I took Regents exams. I know what state exams are, not a big deal. And every teacher knew what they were supposed to teach. At the end of the year, we all bought our Barron's books, and we studied all the Regents exams for biology, because the only reason you learn English and math is to do science. And so we did our biology, and you got your grade. Okay, no problem. Every teacher in the state that was teaching biology knew exactly what was on the curriculum, knew how to prepare kids for the tests. Kids knew what to do to prepare for the tests. Teachers taught the curriculum. Kids took a test. That test went on their transcript. You got to go to college with that grade. If you didn't get a Regents diploma, you got a business degree. East Meadow High School, class of 1973. Got a Regents diploma. My sister, East Meadow High School, class of 1975, got a business degree. She has always made more money than me. Typing in shorthand. Also, East Meadow High School, you graduated with a cosmetology certificate. You graduated with auto mechanics. Lots of different pathways for students. Things are changing, life is moving on. I'm in medicine, not even thinking about education. My son comes home my oldest comes home from school in 8th grade. He can't do science, I can't do it, I don't like it. What? At this time, I'm also a radio talk show host, Kids in Charge, WBAB. Principals are telling me, don't you know you should be a teacher? I go back, I become a teacher. I'm watching all these changes happen from my own experience when there were dinosaurs on the earth. And I'm saying, something's wrong, something's wrong. And in fact, something is wrong. What happened was, as this very, very brilliant woman, Diane Ravitch, said, there was this myth that was being created about public education in America. And people that understood how to make money got this really good idea about how to make money off of public education. And they took their time, and they had a lot of money, and they pushed this forward. It's kind of like the way you make a lobster. You take the live lobster and you put it in the freezer for a while. You have to cook it fresh, it can't be dead. But you lower its metabolism. So when you put it in the pot, it doesn't scream when you kill it. And that's pretty much what's happening to us. They had us in this pot. We thought everything, we were in the freezer, we thought everything was fine, we're doing everything we were supposed to do, and all of this was going on, and they put us in the pot, and that was like, let us out! So, Jeanette Duderman, Marla Kilfoyle, Kevin Glynn, these are all Long Island people. We're all, at the same time, we don't really know each other. We don't know each other at all. But we're all noticing, oh, it's getting hot in here. It's getting hot in this pot. I gotta do something, I gotta do something, I gotta do something. And we're telling other people, because Long Island schools, if we were rated, I mean, it's in all due respect to Tennessee, my brother. Long Island schools are the best in the world. If we rated schools, Long Island schools would be #1 in the country, right? But we're not a state. We're just Long Island. We're part of New York State. Are there schools on Long Island that are not doing as well as East Islip? Are there schools on Long Island that aren't doing as well as Comstock? Belmore? I don't think anybody in this room needs a test to tell us which schools aren't doing as well as East Islip, do we? It's poverty, stupid, right? It's poverty. That's the issue. We know where the poorest districts are. So we've got these great schools, and they're doing really, really well, and now we are taking everything that we know, everything that Dr. Gember was talking about, all the stuff we know. My welcome letters that go home to parents, on the bottom it gives me permission to take the kids out anytime I want. Because we study succession, so we go down and 4 or 5 times a year, we go to the field about a half a mile down the road, and we study the field. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to be worrying about the test. And so I started by invitation, Ms. Goodman, Ms. Kilfoyle, by invitation, going around to these speaking engagements. And I had parents saying to me, but what are the teachers willing to do? We're going to opt out. What are you willing to do? Okay, so it's scary for a teacher to say this because, in fact, I can lose my job. Not only can I lose my job, can I be fired, but I can also have my license removed by the state of New York. That means I could never teach anywhere in the state of New York. And as much as I love my friend from Tennessee, my family is here in New York. I don't want to go to Tennessee. So I said, okay, I'm the union president. I'm not going to let any of my members do this, but I'll put myself out there. I'm telling everybody, please refuse to allow your children to have this, to take this test. Every parent, please do this. As the chair of the ST caucus, with my friends, I was able to write a resolution that was passed unanimously on the floor of the New York State United Teachers Representative Assembly. Every teacher in the state of New York should refuse to allow, if they so choose, to allow their child to take these tests. And then last year, I started getting parents, and I started thinking myself, and I started having parents say, you need to do more, you need to do more. Well, that little episode with Mr. King and I, quite honestly, I wasn't supposed to speak that day. Dr. Rella was supposed to speak, but he's the superintendent, sometimes has to do stuff that's important. So he said, you go. So I had nothing prepared. And when I stood up that day and I said to him, I am a mandated child abuse reporter for the state of New York as a teacher. This is child abuse. And last year I said to Joe, you know, Joe, either I'm full of malarkey or I mean what I say. And if I mean what I say, I have to do what I say. And so I refuse to administer the tests. And so I joined the conscientious objector movement. And really for me, this has been a growing sort of situation. As I do this work more and more, I begin to understand more and more, and I speak more and more, and I go across the state and speak, and what I see now is they've decided to have a moratorium. They've decided to put out more nonsense to confuse people. And what I like to do is make it really simple. So there's a moratorium. The tests don't count for kids. The tests don't count for teachers. Then why are you making them do it? Why are our evaluations counted? 50% of our evaluations are based on the test score. Oh, no, they're not. Yeah, they are. If I don't use the, we're almost to 90% in Comstock for our opt-out numbers. We're almost at 90%. So we have slows, because you have to have something to put in that box to send to the state. Why are we wasting time on it? Because there's a law, 3012D, that requires districts year after year after year to waste our time as union presidents negotiating deals to nowhere. Every year we're supposed to negotiate a new contract. Every year there's money and time wasted in this. There's money and time wasted in the testing. Regents exams didn't cost anything. 100 years ago when I took the first Earth Science Regents that was given in the state of New York, these tests cost a lot of money. And in order for the district to be covered, they have to offer the test to every child. See, if the district doesn't purchase all the tests, then the state can come in and say that the district or the Board of Ed did something wrong. But there's no worry about funding because every district buys enough tests for every child. Now, if the children don't take the tests, there's nothing the state can do because that's my right as a parent or as a grandparent to refuse that my child take the test. The district, though, has to purchase the test. You see where this is going? The money's getting made. The money's not getting made by you all. You're paying taxes. And you've got this 2% tax cap, right? Which is nonsense. It's a fluid number. I'm not really sure what your number is here in Islip, but in Comstock it's less than 0. Because of the way that everything plays out and the fluidity of the tax cap, it's not 0. It's less than 0. It's not 2%. And how do you all feel about that $200 check you got from the government? Because you're 2%, right? They'll buy everybody with that check. Look at what we've done for you. Well, you haven't done anything for us. He's figuring out ways. This superintendent, my superintendent, your superintendent, they're figuring out ways to get companies involved to buy things for our school. We never had to worry about that before. If we wanted a 9% tax increase because we had stuff we had to do, we put it out to the voters. 50%, 51% said yes, it passed, and we got it. If not, we didn't get it. Then the community said no. Now, 59.8% of ComSwab wanted to override the budget, and it went down because it was less than 60%. Mr. Cuomo would love 59% of the vote. He would love that. He'd love 52%. I don't think he could get arrested now. I want him to. Mr. Trump would love 59%. Ms. Clinton would love 59%. We couldn't get a budget passed with 59.8%. That's not even American. So, what is the testing doing? It's taking away from classroom time. It's making every child in every class learn exactly the same way, when we all know, whether we're teachers or not, that even if you have more than one child, you know that all of your children are different. One is not smarter than the other. Forget about smart. Smart doesn't mean anything. What matters is whether or not a child will have an experience with a teacher that will allow them to grow. I don't have time to let your children grow if I'm following the modules and doing everything I need to do every single day in a prescribed way. So I'm not telling you that the Common Core is bad. It's just another tool in my toolbox. I'm a teacher, I have a toolbox. Whole language. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with whole language. Whole language got a really bad rap. I loved whole language. I loved it. When I started teaching, I was like 42 years old, and I came in and I was teamed with these really, really old teachers that were 48. And they had been teaching forever, and I was like, oh, we're going to do this. Oh, we're going to do the metric system. We're going to have metric week. And they were like, oh, God, not her, not at her age. And we did metric. We had such a good time, and they did math, metric math, and they did metric system and science, and they read about the math. They learned the history of it. These people are still my friends today, even though they've retired already for many years. Whole language was great. And then you have those people that hate whole language. Whole language is just a tool in my toolbox. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. It's who I am. It's not what I do. It's who I am. I know how to help your child, and I know how to help your child. And I know that this week, this class cannot do graphing. If I send these people to the high school without wasting a week on graphing, every teacher in the high school next year is going to hang me, right? And so I do it because I won't administer the tests. I won't administer the SLOs. I will be found ineffective this year, and I don't really give a horse's potato about it. I don't care what the state thinks. I'm retiring next June, so I don't think my superintendent will have enough time to fire me. But even if he did, I don't think that he would, because he understands. I don't care. I'm using science. Good teachers use curricula. They use subject matter to help you, as parents, raise viable world citizens. That's all we're doing. And if they don't have time to think and dream, then we're not going to be the country that we need to be. One day, we're all going to be on a gurney looking up into the eyes of a child that you certainly hope is not looking down at you thinking, is this A, B, C, or D? Hopefully that child is looking down at you and they are free enough with their experience in school to just take a chance. I've been in the emergency room. That's where I did most of my, I was in St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center on 113th Street in Harlem, one of the 5 trauma centers in New York City. Trust me, I knew when it was the summertime, because then there were more stabbings than gunshot wounds. In the winter, there were more gunshot wounds than stabbings because people did it from the cars. Do you understand what I'm saying? When those patients came in, there was no textbook for me to go by. I had to know that I could trust myself to take a chance. And I'm telling you, give your children that chance. Standardized testing is not the way to go. If there's ever the words, an adjective, high stakes before testing, protect your children. It's child abuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Marla Kilfoyle. She's an educator and general manager for the Badass Teachers Association, a national educator nonprofit organization which has become a strong and powerful voice for public schools and public school educators. She is also on the steering committee for the New York State Allies for Public Education, also known as the MESI. Welcome, Marla.
I'm going to use this because I'm just like using mics. Anyway, I'm going to kind of bring the national perspective to New York because when I had to get involved on sort of the national theater, I was honestly sitting here in New York and going, oh, that's not happening to us right now. You know, I have my friends, I have Larry Prophet here from Tennessee, he's a Tennessee bat. Visiting here from New York, and you know, I would hear, and also running for office, he's running for State House, I would hear stories from people all around the country. Oh, this is happening, or, you know, in Kansas, Governor Brownback is, you know, taking away teachers' right to collectively bargain, and I'm like sitting in New York going, oh God, thank God that none of that's happening to me. And then it just came like a wave. It was almost like a tsunami wave. And so now it's here. So I'm going to talk about the national attack on public education. I'm going to sound like I totally have a tin hat on. I don't. I'm a very normal person. Yep, that's debatable. But I'm going to start with a quick story. And of course I didn't have it with me. Does this picture look familiar to you? Any of you ever seen this picture? How many of you have seen this picture? It's got a story with it. About a year ago, a California teacher shared this story with bats. And I'm going to read it to you, but I'm not going to tell you the full title of it until I'm done with it. It's a story of a California teacher that was giving her class a test. Like we do that every day, teacher do test. So I'm going to read this to you. The teacher writes, we have been told to set up each child with their own account on their numbered Chromebooks. The teacher on special assignment came around and spent about an hour in each class doing and setting up these computers the previous weeks. We didn't know exactly when the test would be given, just that sometime on Thursday or Friday the proctor would come and test the kids. I set out the morning work and today, but the bell rang and the proctor arrived. I quickly swept off the tables, and she said that we'd begin right away. I went out to pick up my class. While the proctor set up the computers, disregarding what we'd done that hour, I went through the usual morning work, and parents who happened to be in the room scrambled to unpack the headphones, which had just arrived that morning, and distribute the computers. We started a half hour late. The kids were excited to be using the computers, but that didn't last very long. The test is adaptive. When a child answers a question, the next batch of questions is slightly harder or easier depending on the correctness of their answer. The math and language arts sections each, listen to this, had 57 questions each. 57 for math, 57 for ELA. Got that? Mm-hmm. Okay. The kids didn't understand that to hear the directions, you needed to click the speaker icon, and we slipped around the room and we explained this to them. Answers were selected by drop and drag with a trackpad. There were no mouse available. A proctor in one room said that if the child indicated their answer, an adult could help, but other proctors told us we weren't allowed to do this. I had trouble dragging and dropping myself as an adult on the little track pads. Kids in one class took 5 hours to finish. Kids were crying in 4 of the 5 classes. There were multiple computer crashes, and we had to say to the kids, okay, you just sit there while we fix it. Don't talk to anyone. There were kids sitting for a half hour with the volume turned off on their headsets, but not saying anything. Kids accidentally swapped Tangled headsets and didn't seem to notice that what they heard was the screen of the kid sitting next to them. Kids had to solve 8 plus 6 when the answer choice were 0-9. They had to drag and drop first a 1, then a 4 to form a 14. Remember all this stuff. There were questions that it was only necessary to click an answer, but the objects were movable. And in order, the kids were tapping on each other's computers in frustration. And to go to the next question, they had to click next in the lower right-hand corner, which also happened to be where the shutdown button was. Is this what we really want for our youngest children? And the title of this article was, Today My Kindergartners Took a Test Called the Common Core Math. That was a kindergarten class. Okay. Well, some of you don't know me, so I'm just going to run through and introduce myself. I'm the mom of a 13-year-old public school child. He has been a refusal child since 3rd grade, and I'm very angry about that. I'm angry that I have to go to that length to protect him, and I tell people that all the time. I've been a public school educator for 29 years. I have a master's in education. I'm national board certified, and I've taught in every region in the country you could think about, rural, suburban, urban. I'm also the executive director of BATS, as Gigi noted, and very proudly on the steering committee of NICE. So what is BATS? And I tell this only because I'd like people to understand my finger on the pulse of what's happening nationally. I probably spend more time online than all of you combined. But BATS is a national activist organization. We fight the privatization efforts of the very, very few elite, and I'll talk about them in a minute. We were started in June of 2013. We have a pretty extensive social media platform. We have chapters in every state that are doing all kinds of crazy things. You can see some of that up there. We do have legislation in the new ESSA law, which requires Title II funds to be spent on studying teacher workplace conditions. We also wrote an amicus brief to the Supreme Court for the Friedrichs decision, which tried to strip our rights of collective bargaining rights. And we're currently applying for 2 grants to study workplace conditions of teachers and its impact on learning. So we're busy. We're really busy. Some of the things we've done, you remember Chris Christie screaming at the teacher? She's a bat. We occupied Bernie Sanders' office, that's in the lower right corner. Our bats in Washington protesting the Gates Foundation. We're on radio, we're all over the place. We try to get everywhere we can. So, who's really attacking public education? I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat here. You've got 4 pretty wealthy foundations that like to pretend that they're doing really great things for kids, and they're really not. And it's really hard when you discover this. Jeanette and I have always talked about it. When you learn the truth and you're an ethical and moral person, you're not going to back down. And you got to fight for the truth. So when I learned that the Gates Foundation, the Wamp Foundation, the Koch brothers, and the Broad Foundation were 4 of the most powerful money entities that were really going after public education in very different ways. The Koch brothers are seeking to bust teachers' unions. They're the ones that funded Friedrichs versus CTA. They would love to not have any unions in this country. None. They would love for all of us to be, they would love for every state to be a right-to-work state. The Broad Foundation, well, Eli Broad pledged to charterize half of the LA school district. Loves charters, rah, rah, rah for charters. Wamp Foundation is the same thing. The Gates Foundation, they pretty much own the U.S. Department of Education. There's nothing that comes out of the U.S. DOE that Bill Gates doesn't have his fingerprints on or his money associated with it. So we might as well just call it the Gates Department of Education. So this attack looks different in different regions. And I often talk about my fight. My fight began in suburbia. It began here on suburban Long Island. I had a 13-year-old son coming home with crappy Common Core. I wasn't happy. I got involved in bats. I met people from all over the country, different areas. So my fight became not just about Long Island. It became about Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans, Memphis, Tennessee, Florida. It became about the stories that I was hearing. And this attack looked very different to me in very different areas. So in urban areas, you can look to places like Chicago on the south side. When you have 16 parents that have to starve themselves for 30 days to keep their only existing high school open in their neighborhood, that's a problem. In New Orleans, after Katrina, you had 5 traditional public schools left. They charterized the entire district. Of the 107 charters, 6 of them are only operating at proficiency. The rest of them are struggling. Detroit, the emergency manager who runs the Detroit school system, who was appointed by Governor Schneider, also happens to be the same emergency manager that poisoned the city of Flint. So they gave him a promotion and let him run the Detroit public schools. He just resigned about 3 weeks ago. The common element in all of these cases, these are urban communities of color, and they are on and under a direct assault by the privatizers in this country. Direct and full assault. They're closing their schools down, they're bringing in charters, and they're giving their children TFA as teachers. In our area, in suburban and rural areas, it's, as we know, the systemic underfunding of our schools. Let's underfund them. There's a whole playbook for this. Let's underfund them. Let's create tests to set their kids up to fail. Does this sound familiar? Then let's use the narrative that the schools are failing and that the narrative that the teachers are horrible, and we're going to make an evaluation system to get rid of those horrible teachers. We're going to place schools into receivership or close them if we call them failing. We're going to hand them over to the state, which we all know doesn't work. What we're seeing in rural areas is this push to online testing. And what we're seeing in suburban areas is this huge push for technology, as Beth was talking about today. And we know that a lot of our districts don't have the money to even sustain or fund the technology that's being pushed into our schools. We just don't have the money to sustain them. So the attack looks very, very different depending on what region that you're in. Thanks, I think it's the middle one. I'm kind of... Oh. So what does this have to do with us? Well, we all have to be upstanders. It can be about your story, but it's also got to be about the stories of the moms and dads in Chicago, or the moms and dads in Detroit, or even here on Long Island, because the attack is very, very different. So I went, like I said, from an opt-out mom, I got schooled very, very quickly. Very quickly. And now I know that I have to be an upstander for everybody. This can't just be about Long Island, it's got to be about everything. And just, you know, some of the contacts that I had up at the top, that's G2 Brown, is a great Chicago activist. Underneath there, that's Rosemary Vega and her husband, Jesus Ramos, had their school closed. She still can't talk about it. 5 years ago, she just sobs, it's devastated her. Brother Richard Franklin is the president of the Birmingham, Alabama Teachers Association, and they're under a huge assault. Newark Student Union, have you ever heard of them? A couple people? They actually occupied their superintendent's office. They occupied it. She's a total Brody super, was trying to charterize the district, and they went in and occupied her office. She's since resigned. The gals who work with AQE, they're very active in New York City. And one of the prouder pictures that I have is me standing in front of the Capitol building, because I did interview for the Board of Regents 4 weeks ago, but they didn't give me the job. What a bummer. But we got a great chancellor today. Oh, thank you. So how are our teachers feeling? They're defeated, demeaned, demoralized, beat down, frustrated. Their environment is your child's learning environment. And they're going to come to school and they're going to be happy and they're going to they're going to put on that brave warrior face, but I think one of the most defining moments for me in getting involved here is that I work with probably one of the greatest film teachers on the planet. And when they first evaluated us and we got our scores back, I'll never forget this. She walked into a room and we were all grading at the end of the year. She walked into the room and she was like sobbing. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she was so upset that her evaluation wasn't what she expected it to be. And it just defeated her. And she's since left the profession. She left the profession. We lost a really, really good film teacher. So I'm going to invite you to check out the BATS-AFT Quality of Life Work-Life Survey. It kind of talks a little bit about how teachers are feeling nationally. It was a huge survey we did of about 30,000 teachers along with the AFT research. And I think it will give you a good pulse on how teachers are feeling across the nation. And I think I might be done. So, what can you do? Get educated. Diane Ravitch's blog is a great place to start. She covers a lot of New York, a lot of the nation. Journey for Justice and Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools are really great organizations if you want to get a pulse on some of the other attacks that I've been talking about. NICEAP's website and BATS, we usually publish the writing of just boots on the ground teachers. Commit to what you can do. Do what speaks to your heart. If you're a good writer, start a blog and write. If you're an organizer, organize house parties. Do what speaks to your heart, and that will make the difference. Make appointments with your lawmakers, hold them accountable, visit them, make phone calls, follow up. They have to fear you. They have to fear you. When you call up, they're going to take the call. Hold your school officials accountable for their policies. If their policies are rooted in AstroTurf rhetoric, like, oh, those failing schools, or gee, these tests are wonderful and have changed, or whatever, you need to hold them accountable. That's important. And I think that might be it. Yeah, thank you.
So much, Marla. One thing that Marla had mentioned was charter schools. And if you think that it's not going to happen in this area, all we have to do is look to Brentwood and to Central Islip. They tried to do it there, and the parents got together with the legislators and shut them down. Our next speaker, I don't think needs a big introduction because this small, intimate group that we all know Miss Bonnie Buckley.
Just give me a second to set up my PowerPoint, please.
Okay, so Marla also mentioned talking to people, talking to your legislators. I started 2013 talking to my friends, my neighbors. I had some people come to my house in intimate groups, right, Angela? And I tried to speak with them and tell them all about it, whether they believed me or not. But now eventually they came around because you can't deny the fact that public education is under assault. And we, as parents, have the power to make that change. And with that, I'll hand you over to Bonnie.
And I don't think I'm not going to use this. This is way too loud. You can all hear me, right? Generally speaking, you heard Mom talk. All right, so I speak about basically the impact of the Common Core, or actually education reform, on children with learning disabilities, and then I speak about the diploma crisis. So students with disabilities can lag up to 4 years behind their neurotypical peers. Anybody here has a child with a learning disability knows that your child is lagging behind, generally academically and emotionally, behind their typical peers. The rotten core is 2 years ahead academically, averaging. That means that your teachers are evaluating students with learning disabilities up to 6 years ahead of their biological age. Think of the difference between a 6-year-old child and a 12-year-old. If you have raised children, and I'm assuming that everybody here is raising or has raised children, 6 and 12, that's a huge, huge, huge disparity. Sorry, I have my computer's a touch screen, so I'm not going to do slides. So 2 years ago in a separate location, I'm a New York City school teacher, I'm administering the New York State ELA exam, and 10 minutes into it, one of my students, I'm a special ed teacher, one of my students puts their head down and says, I can't. Actually, yes, I can. Not I won't, I can't. And I feel terribly small. I can't even imagine how that kid felt. I couldn't believe how small I felt. And my daughter, who goes to school in the school, and I'm looking around this room, and pretty much I know everybody in this room, and you know my daughter. And I thought about how she actually escaped, well, she didn't escape, but she came in on the tail end of this. And I thought about the disabilities that she has, and I thought about how she struggled every day. And I thought about this, and in administering the New York State EL exam, I actually started to cry. Not, cry in the classroom, but I just felt sick to my stomach, and it kind of lit a fire under me. And I found this the other day. I thought it was kind of funny. We need to add an instruction about vomiting, and one about tissues for crying, and an envelope for the baby teeth, so little ones can pull out their teeth as well as their hair. And how about a page for the opt-out doodlers? And great idea, we'll grade their doodles. And the thing is that, I know that some people, when they hear teachers talk about that, there's vomiting and crying and hair pulling, and I've actually had people say, oh, come on, that doesn't really happen. Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. It happens. In fact, it happens, and it happens a lot. In my building, I work in a New York City school, we had kids screaming down the hall and ripping down bulletin boards. Fact, okay? Go to the next one, please. Some of the most significant risks posed by high-stakes tests for students with learning disabilities. Increased grade retention despite the fact that this is an ineffective intervention to improving academic achievement. They are retained. Children with learning disabilities are retained, and they are retained pretty regularly. There are very large performance gaps. I had a parent, I attended Todd Kaminsky's announcement on the internet a minute yesterday, and another parent came and said that her daughter scored a 1 with a learning disability. And, her classmates are scoring 3s. Well, she's got a learning disability. So why would you do that to your kid anyway? Increased numbers of dropouts. Children who are failing high-stakes testing and have learning disabilities are dropping out. And that's fact. As a result, the research shows that these adults are more likely to be unemployed, living on public assistance, or in prison. Some students with disabilities may even be encouraged to leave school. And this is a phenomenon. I've been doing a lot of reading. Every time I hear Marla speak, and I'm not, many of my friends are in this audience. You know me. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I don't wear a tin. Every time I hear her speak, I'm horrified more. I work in a district that is predominantly minority, and I told Gigi today on the phone, I see it. I see it with my own 2 eyes. And the studies with disabilities, they're encouraged to drop out, and they're called push-outs now. They actually call these children push-outs. We're pushing them out of school because the state doesn't want to be accountable for them, and the schools don't want to be accountable for them, and they're children with learning disabilities. And where do they end up? They end up in prison. 82% of U.S. criminals are high school dropouts. 82%. Why are we pushing kids out of school? I know why I would refuse to allow my daughter with learning disabilities to take these tests. My daughter's a junior in high school. I can't refuse the test that she has to take, and I'll get to those in a minute. But the test and punish cycle that students with disabilities are experiencing, that's a typo, I'm going to fix that. Wouldn't assessments written by all our highly educated and qualified teachers be more appropriate? Assessments that would truly drive instruction, IEP goals, and teaching plans? What about the long-term anxiety? We have 3rd grade students that are pulling out their hair, eyelashes, and eyebrows. What are those children doing to relieve that anxiety in high school? And I believe in this very community we have already acknowledged that we have a drug problem. Where do you think those kids are going next? And lastly, if it is robbing a general education child of any joy of learning, what exactly do you think is happening to the kid that already feels inadequate, stupid, disenfranchised, and different? What do you think it's doing to my kid? And all the kids I know, all the kids that we all know, this is a community that has the EJ Autism Foundation. We've got a lot of kids that are right front and center with learning disabilities. How do you think those kids are feeling in this testing environment? I don't know about you, but my mom always used to say, you're only a kid once. You will have adult responsibilities and care soon enough for the rest of your life. Guard your childhood. Guard it with all you have. And don't we owe our kids that? No. That's it. I want my child to learn to think out of the box, not to fill in little bubbles. Our kids that are differently able to already think out of the box, there's there's loads of data on the brilliance of children with learning disabilities, how they develop later in life, how they go on to lead successful, happy lives, they're contributing members of society. I believe that many children with learning disabilities really come into their own late, very, very late, 18, 19, 20, sometimes not even till 25. Why would I set my child up to fail when she has so much, or they have so much untapped potential? Why would I expect non-standard students to be successful at a standardized test? And that brings me to the diploma crisis. And this is something, this is kind of what I wasn't really part of this movement, but this really lit a fire under me last June. And I go around with Jeanette, Marla, and I speak about this because every single day, no lie, somebody reaches out to me and says, I didn't know. And this is it, did you know? Starting with the class of 2015, the graduating class of 2015, every single child in the state of New York that is not alternately assessed must take Regents exams to get a high school diploma. How many of you in this room have Regents diplomas? That's a pretty good number. I have one. My husband, who's a member of Mensa, Mensa's that IQ, really high IQ population in the world, he tells me last night he doesn't have one, and I'm laughing my butt off because I'm like, oh, you're an idiot, you don't have a Regents diploma. He's a member of Mensa, but he really isn't, he's brilliant. But Regents are not a determinant of success or intellect. You absolutely must have a high school diploma to take a civil service test. This is something else, this all started to gel for me, like I said last June. You have to have a diploma to take a civil service exam, join the military, get a job, go to a 2-year school or a vocational school. If you are roughly my age, you were able to choose, and don't ask how old I am, you were able to choose Regents, non-Regents, and you can't do that anymore. You cannot opt out of Regents exams. You absolutely must take Regents exams. For a child with an IEP, there are some allowances. The local diploma, which used to be the local diploma tied to the RCTs, which is the Regents competency tests, is now passing a Regents at 5 is 55, which doesn't sound insurmountable. You think, okay, 55, what's the big deal? There's also the CDOS, which I hardly ever talk about, and Jeanette's heard me say this, because the CDOS is crap. I won't talk about the CDOS because it is crap. If somebody in your high school guidance office is offering you a CDOS and telling you that it's good for your child, tell them it's crap. And what's more is they know it's crap. And it is not good enough for your kid, it's not good enough for anybody's kid. It will not get your child a job in McDonald's flipping hamburgers. And that's a good job for some children. For some people, that's a great job. The CDOS is not going to get you that job. The CDOS is not going to get you a job at all. It's crap. You can remember that I said that. These Regents, the global history, geography, algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 are aligned to the Common Core. The algebra Common Core Regents last year was a front page disaster. Does everybody remember that Regents exam? Front page disaster. The cut scores for Regents exams are manipulated by New York State Ed because they want to keep the graduation rates flat. They don't want you to know that this is failing. So the cut score, and I thought this was hysterically funny when I heard this. When I went to high school, 65 was passing. You got a 65 and you passed. Yeah, well, last year on that algebra Regents, you could score 30 because this cut score was a 30, and they threw you the 35 extra points, and now you've got a passing score in a Regents exam. In my opinion, one way to fix this whole problem is New York State Ed can make the cut score 10, and I could go home and start planning a graduation party. The Global History and Geography Regents in its current form is the most failed Regents of all Regents exams. The Global History has 50 multiple choice of DBQ and a thematic essay. It covers thousands of years of history. The curriculum is 2 years. Most of the children that I know, not all, but most of the children I know with learning disabilities have working memory index problems. My own daughter's is in the 9th percentile. In order to pass this particular Regent, she would have to carry a hard copy of the Global History textbook into the book test with her and flip through the pages. She has taken that exam twice. I informed New York State in January that she will not be taking it, and I'm kind of throwing it on them to figure out what they're going to do to get her out of high school. Students from the other, this is one of my favorite things, one of my most favorite things that occurred to me while I was driving. I think I was talking to you, was I talking to you on the phone? If you go to high school in any one of the other 48 states, not New York and not California, okay, any other state, you can get a high school diploma from that state, and you can come here, and you can go to a college or a university in New York State. My daughter has to go out of state to get a high school diploma so she can come back to this state and go to school here. She cannot attend a college or university in this state because it requires that she pass 5 regents out of 55 to get a high school diploma. I could move to Pennsylvania tomorrow, but I work in Jamaica, Queens, and the commute would be kind of rough. There are 15,000 children per grade cohort in the state, in our state with learning disabilities. Students in their junior year right now, which would be my daughter, did not encounter the Common Core until the back end of 8th. Remember that rollout? The back end of 8th grade? They announced it at a January board meeting. They turned around and told us that they were rolling out the Common Core in January. It was awesome. I am the parent of 2 children, those of you who know me, and a 21-year-old son and my 17-year-old daughter. She has what I call the trifecta. My friends know I call it something else I won't say. The trifecta of learning disabilities. Caroline is dyslexic, language impaired, and she has ADD. I often can't decide if she can't speak because she can't read. She can't read because she can't speak, or because she can't do either because she can't pay attention. I don't know that I'll ever figure it out. But in spite of academic success in her classrooms, she cannot get out of high school. And my daughter has never failed a class. Not one. I love technology and then I hate it. Okay. I'm going to tell the story really quickly because many of you that have sat in my house know this story already. So last year I sent my daughter's guidance counselor after she fails those 2 regents, and I love my daughter's guidance counselor, and she lays out to me the way that my daughter's going to get out of high school, and it's that 5 at 55. And I think she has to be wrong. There has to be another choice. I call New York State Ed, and I call New York State Ed on my way out to see Assemblyman Garbarino, who happens to be our Assemblyman, and I'll get to him in a minute. And I have New York State Ed on the phone, and this very nice woman is talking to me, and I tell her, and she says to me, oh no, that's true. And I said, well, what is the plan? What is the plan for children with learning disabilities? What's the plan? And I ask her like 3 times, and she tells me about the pathways. And in case you don't know it, there are 44 pathways to a high school diploma in the state of New York. 44! And I think to myself, are we graduating veterinarians? Chemical engineers? Who needs 44 pathways to a high school diploma? But not one of them will suit my daughter. And I say to her over and over again, what is the plan? Because I am so flabbergasted by this, and I think to myself, if I was this bad at my job, I'd be fired. And she turns around finally, I think in frustration, she says to me, Mrs. Buckley, we haven't finished developing the pathways. And I literally look at my phone and go, did the agency responsible for the education of 2.5 million children just tell me that they don't have a pathway for children like my child? She actually just acknowledged that. And it still to this day astounds me. And then I have another burning question. What about the kids who aren't academically inclined? What about the kids that don't have learning disabilities, that just aren't really, into academics? I remember going to high school, I remember dozens of children that chose not to take Regents exams because they didn't require that level of scholarly study to do what they were going to do. I remember boys who could build cars out of parts they found in the street. I remember girls that were doing fingernails and hair from the time they were 5, and all their friends would go to their house and have their hair done. I remember I had a friend who would take photographs with a camera, back before cameras focused for you, and you actually had to focus it yourself, and she was an artist. And I remembered all these people, and I thought to myself, like, what happened to the multiple intelligences, and why aren't we celebrating all the gifts that children had? Betty Pilner came tonight, and she's somebody I met in this fight, and her son is musically gifted. Gifted. And he's supposed to graduate in June, roughly 45 days from now. And he's being denied a diploma by the state of New York because of an ELA test. And then I think to myself, every child should have the opportunity to excel at that level. And not every child is expected to be a brain surgeon or an accountant or a dentist. And then I think, when did we start pigeonholing children? And who thought that was a good idea? And is he currently the United States Secretary of Education? And it occurs to me that in a civilized society, I hold in very high esteem the man that takes my garbage away. I love that man. I buy him a gift every Christmas. I think he's awesome. I think my mechanic, and my mechanic is fairly well known to all of you in this community. I think he's brilliant. I drive my car into his lot, he listens to it for 5 minutes, he says, Bonnie, I think such and such is your problem, he fixes it. I think he's a gifted man. He drives a better car than I do, and he lives in a better section of the neighborhood. I had my ear repaired today by a person skilled at that. I am certain he has a high school diploma. Do I care if he can write a thematic essay? No. I call Regent Tillis and I meet with him. I meet with him 3 times. I will never do that again. I attend multiple meetings with politicians, with other parents, Gigi, and another parent from Babylon. We start that Facebook page. I have a copy. Don't flip this page, actually. I'm going to read something to you because this is something that, and I won't make you suffer for too long. I have a copy of the New York State ELA Regents from August 2015, and I'm going to read to you when I find the page. Okay. Pay attention. Pay very close attention. Pretend that you are a child with a language impairment, ADHD, and dyslexia, or any one of those. Or maybe you're on the spectrum. Maybe you have a spectrum disorder. Listen to this. August 2015. You ready? Rural and urban residents alike are increasingly becoming attuned to the way food tastes, despite or perhaps because of the abundance of highly processed matter that typically adorns our plate and lines our stomach meal after meal. Yet the era of convenience foods, absent of flavor beyond that provided by salt, corn sweeteners, and fat, is slowly waning as we begin to collectively comprehend the devastating long-term impact this kind of food culture has on public health. Nationally, 300,000 annual obesity-related deaths have finally managed to send small ripples. Are you bored yet? Are you bored? That's the first paragraph of a page and a half of the listening portion of the New York State ELA Regents exam from 2005 August.
What grade?
That would be, the ELA Regents is administered in the junior year. My daughter will be taking it in June. That article is taken, it gets better. That article is taken from an article called Local, you can go 2 slides. Gigi, if you would, please. It's taken from an article called Local Food Consumption in Rural Public Health, published in Rural Roads in 2006. From their homepage, the award-winning quarterly magazine features articles carefully selected, are you ready, to engage. Were any of you engaged? And you're adults. Educate? Okay, maybe you got a little education. Were you entertained? Nope. Yeah, me neither. Those working to improve healthcare in rural America. Please see again, those working to improve healthcare in rural America. Now, given I will say that there are rural communities in upstate New York, so I'm out on the out on the East End. On the very same Regents exam, these words appear: attuned, languishing, periphery, proliferating, linoleum, tuberous, durability, organically contend, aptly, resurgent, ambiance, luminous, luxuriant, hankered, amenities, irksome, anomalies, calamities, salivate, scuttle, and ailerons. Anybody know what an aileron is? Anybody want to hazard a guess as to what an aileron is? Yeah. Okay, so an aileron is a flying thing. Not a plane, it's kind of like a paper kind of flying thing. I didn't know what it was either, and I actually, those of you who know me in the room, I have a pretty decent vocabulary. So my eyes glazed over after the first sentence, and this is supposed to be engaging reading for a high school student, and it kind of really annoyed me because I thought to myself, you know, is New York State, or the test makers, is there a rule that it has to be the most tedious, boring, hostile reading material they can lay their hands on? Do you know what else appears on New York State ELA Regents? Chekhov, Stephen Hawking's string theory. I read Chekhov in college. Okay, that's where I read Chekhov. I read Chekhov in high school. I have a Regents diploma, and Chekhov is not on my Regents exam. So I got nauseous when I first read the ELA Regents. I know dozens and dozens of children, we all do, with spectrum disorders, dyslexia, and language impairments. There is no way that these tests are accessible to them. Other children have developed anxiety disorders in high school. If I was in high school today, I'd have a nervous breakdown. So, typically speaking, educating a child that is differently able is expensive for schools and parents. New York State Ed has managed to tell our kids that they have an earned piece of paper that says high school diploma. just a piece of paper, but right now, to me, it's looking like the Willy Wonka golden ticket. Okay? My daughter's been in school for 13 years. She's passed all her requirements, and she thinks she does deserve a diploma. I like to share always 2 pieces of information because this was something else that I learned. So anyway, my daughter's supposed to schedule to take the retakes back in August of the 2 regents that she failed in June. She's supposed to take them both on, and as it turns out, remember I said 5 of 55? Okay, 5 of 55 to graduate. 3 of those regents exams show up in the same time slot. 4 test time slots, 3 of them show up at August 12th to 12:30. So I call Bayshore, where she's supposed to take them, and I get this really nice person on the phone, and she says to me, "Oh, Mrs. Buckley, it happens all the time." David Katz, I'm sorry, it's not David, but there's a gentleman named Katz. He's the testing coordinator for the New York State Education Department. I've called his office 6 times. He never calls me back. Anyway, again, going back to if I was that bad at my job, I didn't expect to be fired, okay? So I call Bayshore, and she says, "It happens all the time. We make them comfortable, blah, blah, blah." My daughter gets extra time. I'm looking at 4.5 hours per regents, 9 hours. Say they give her half an hour for lunch, 15-minute breaks to go to the bathroom. I'm looking at a whopping 10 hours of regents exam time in August in a school building on Long Island. So I call New York State Ed, and I get the same woman who told me that about the 5 of 55, and it was correct. Very nice lady, and she says to me, and I immediately start saying, "No way, no way, not my kid. My kid is not sitting for 10 hours of regents testing." Within, I would say, maybe 5 minutes, she throws out to me that there is a waiver available. No child has to sit the 2 regents on the same day if you have an IEP. There is a waiver available. It is in the testing booklet, okay? I tell audiences this all the time, and the reason I tell you is because I said to her, "I'm sure Caroline Buckley's not the only child in the state with this problem. You know, what do you do about all the other children?" And she turns around and tells me, "Well, that's their guidance counselor or parent's problem. They have to get that information." And I think to myself, shame on you. You're the agency in charge of this. In my mind, the onus is on you to tell these children that there's a break available for them. But she tells me they don't have the manpower. So then I turn around and tell her, "Well, I hope you have the manpower for all the people I'm going to tell on Facebook and in audiences." Number 2, if your child has read aloud, there's a misunderstanding that ELAs cannot be read out loud. They cannot be read aloud in grades 3 through 8, ELA regents, and the global history can both be read aloud. So if they tell you that that's not true, they're misinformed. Not absent nor tardy, passed all my classes with a C or better, active in organizations, volunteering in the community. I have to repeat the grade because of tests or stay in high school until I'm 21, which, you know, high school is such a fabulous place. We all want to be here till we're 21. Many of our children have had individual education plans for years. To get out of high school, they should have individual graduation plans. It is, after all, a high school diploma, not a permit to do brain surgery. Get over yourselves, New York State Ed. It's the high school diploma. I want to talk very quickly about yesterday. This is Assemblyman Todd Kaminsky. He is the Assemblyman in Betty Pilnick's community. And yesterday he announced 4 bills. He is actually, and I'm not kidding when I tell you, I made the rounds on this island to talk to politicians. He was the only one, basically, that I could get. And it was through Betty Pilnick to actually sit and listen. And yesterday he announced 4 bills. We only have numbers as of this afternoon for 3 of them. But the first one decouples teacher evaluation from test results. You can read them. Actually, I run a Facebook page with Shiji and somebody else called Multiple Pathways to a Diploma. In the interest of saving some time, you can read them, the rest of them there. I'm going to go immediately to the bottom one, which is establishing a career and practical education pathway to a high school diploma, which will provide a valuable alternative to students who do not wish to take or are unable to pass Regents exams. Please follow the page, Multiple Pathways, and also Jeanette Dudeman's Long Island opt-out page. They'll also be posted there. And when the bill numbers are posted, there'll be a letter available from New York State Allies for Public Education. Please, 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 I'm begging you, all of you, to pass the information on to your friends and family. Ask them to write a letter and ask them to pass these bills and to do it quickly. The class of 2015 was already left behind. 2016 is 45 days from graduation. And you can go to the last one, which I actually got a big kick out of this today. This is the new chancellor. And she said, this is the new chancellor for the Board of Regents for New York State. And she said, immediately following being elected, if I was a parent who's not on the Board of Regents, I would opt out at this time. If she's telling you to opt out, and Jeanette Dudeman's telling you to opt out, and Marla Cafoyle's telling you to opt out, and Stephanie Baranek and Gigi and Kelly, opt out already. And tell your friends to opt out. There's no reason any of our children need to sit for these tests. And children with learning disabilities and our English language learners and children in minority communities it's not even a matter anymore of just opting out because we want, it's harmful. It's harmful. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was going to say something. Oh, the district has been very cooperative. In the past, it was like pulling teeth just to try to get an audience with them. But this year, we're fortunate enough that a letter did go home, a very informative letter, and attached on the second page is a form that you can fill out whether you're allowing your child to take the test or not. And getting that letter in as soon as possible would help the district in the logistical nightmare of having all these, refusers, where to put them in the classroom, out of the classroom. So I'm very thankful that the district worked with us this year. And last but not least, my very good friend who I met in the summer of 2013 in Marla's kitchen when we were filming the documentary Standardized. Please give a warm welcome to Jeanette Duderman.
Forgot that's where we met. Remember that? That seems like forever ago. We've been at this for a long time, and finally, I feel like today we are really starting to see sort of the fruits of our labor. And having Betty Rosa, for those of you that don't know what the Board of Regents and the importance of that is, the Board of Regents is the governing body of our education in New York State. They are in charge of state ed. They set the policy. State ed is supposed to carry out those policies. So they are Commissioner, she is now one of Commissioner Elia's bosses. And that is really a significant and important factor because most of these reforms came in because of Merrill Tisch. This didn't just come in out of nowhere. This was the last chancellor brought all this in. So certainly a new chancellor that has a totally different vision for education can get it out. We're going to have to sort of continue with what we're doing because it allows her the backup to make these changes. If parents start saying, we're good with all this now, no problem, she won't have the backup she needs to continue pushing through these changes. And that's really the most important, thing I want you to come away with from tonight is the importance of why we're still doing what we're doing. Trust me, I would love to retire from this. My kids would love me to retire from this. They call forums for forums. They won't even come anymore. Because, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work what we do. And, I could easily just say, hey, my kids are good. We're opted out. I have a district that, 75% of them opted out. And I could just call it a day at that and say, hey, my kids are good and my district's all right, and let me just pack up and go home. But the important thing is, there are generations of kids coming behind us. There is, as Marla says, this isn't just about our kids. It's not just about my kid, my school, my family. This is about all kids. This is about New York City kids. This is about Long Island kids, upstate New York kids. And now, actually, the entire country is watching New York. And I'll even preface that and say, they're watching Long Island, the entire country. And what we've been doing has been making history, and we have been igniting. What New York has done has ignited the entire rest of the country to start doing a pushback against their standardized testing. And we have the largest opt-out movement. I speak to people from all around the country. People give them my contact information. They contact me, and I spend hours on the phone trying to help them and sort of teach them the formula or the strategies that we've used here in New York and on Long Island so that they could bring it back to where they are and try to ignite people there. I just want to cover real quick, I know it's getting late, so I'll just do something real quick here. I want to talk about what has actually changed versus what you've been told has changed, just so that we can clear up the misinformation. Because to me, the most important thing of what we do is to clear up misinformation. All right, State Ed is saying that the tests are shorter. And if anybody has seen, there's a graphic that's been going around on social media for the last few weeks, and it's perfect. And it shows, it's a bar graph that shows last year's test, the number of test questions, and this year, total number of test questions. And if you look at the bar graphs, when I give like the printouts of them with the photocopies, you cannot even see the difference, because on a photocopy, when it even gets a little shaded just a tiny bit, that's how insignificant the change is, that you can't see the difference. You're talking about 1 or 2 questions per test, some grades, no change. So then State Ed will say, oh, we've test questions, well, there's less test questions. Are they correct? Sure, but there's a difference between an outright lie, a white lie, and the truth. And somewhere in there is what it actually is. Teachers are no longer evaluated by test scores. That's another common thing that's thrown out there. No more test scores as part of the evaluation. Not true. 50% is by law in a teacher's evaluation. They just switched it from the state tests to the local assessments. And again, those are disclosed. Those are my 7th grade son, second day of school. If I didn't opt him out of them, he would have taken 7 or 8 tests the second day of school, and they were all the finals for those classes. So he's a new middle school student, very nervous about going to middle school. We start our middle school in 7th grade. Nervous, all new classes, bigger kids, and he would have started the second day failing 8 assessments. They're designed to fail. So the French test that he's never taken French was in French. And this is what the slows are. And that, unfortunately, is now what is being used as that 50%. The other concern, yes, there's a moratorium, but a moratorium can be changed at any time. So next year, even though there's been a 4-year moratorium passed, next year they could say, you know what, we're not going to do that. And now it's pulled. A new law can be put in to say, no moratorium. Reformers, they want to sue State Ed for the moratorium and for the receivership laws, because there were some schools that came off the receivership list. They want to sue State Ed because as the Board of Regents is trying to regulate around the law, they want to say, no. This is the law, and you're going to stick to it. So the only way that we will protect ourselves from this law is to change the law. And as Bonnie said, Todd Kaminsky has 4 bills out that will do just that if we get everybody to sign on to them. And the important thing about Todd Kaminsky, there's a lot of bills that come past me and that are brought to me, and they say, look at this, isn't this great? Can you guys really get on board with this? And a lot of times the bills are from one of the minority parties. In other words, the GOP in the Assembly or the Dems in the Senate. We have opposite houses, which is part of the problem of why we can't do bills. And when the minority groups or houses are the ones that bring the bills to us, we say, yeah, it's a great bill, but it's no chance. Because really, if the majority isn't the one that's presenting it, and then they can get a bill passed in their house, it's usually dead on arrival. So it hasn't been worth it for us to really put everything behind any of these bills. Todd Kaminsky is a Dem assemblyman, which is important because that means that the Assembly could pass this bill fairly quickly. And he apparently has a lot of support from his members. He's also running in a special election for the Senate. If he gets onto the Senate in April, this is coming up in April, he could have the same as bill going to the Senate as well. So it's a big deal, and it's something that we haven't had. We haven't been this close to getting a bill, a significant bill like this before ever. Tests are no longer created by Pearson. Anybody hear that? That the tests are no longer created by Pearson. Totally not true. They are still Questar, they are still Pearson, they are not Questar yet. We actually foiled the Questar contract, and we just got the contract, and people are going over it, and it looks like not only is it, you know, obviously we knew it was still Pearson this year, but not only that, we're now looking at the possibility that Pearson questions are still going to be on next year's test as well. That Questar is not really fully going to be implemented till the following year. So it's a complete, that to me is a complete lie. You know, there's some things where they're just stretching the truth. That one's a complete fabrication lie when they say this is a Questar test this year. Why? Another one, if you opt out, your district will lose state aid. Absolutely not true. Unfortunately, I just heard today that that is one of the lies that's spreading through the city, perpetuated by their Chancellor Carmen Farina, and she is telling the principals to tell parents that Cuomo will take state aid away, when Cuomo has actually made statements saying he had no intention of doing that. He's staying clear of this whole situation. He don't want nothing to do anymore with education. The legislature has come out and said they won't touch state aid. They can't really. The state aid, the formula for state aid is not something that they can just decide that they feel like changing at any point. That all these things are regulation and law, so that would need to be changed to regulation or law, not just because they decided they want to punish someone. So state aid cannot be touched. Also, the federal Title I money that everybody's been talking about, we're going to lose money, we're going to lose Title I, we're going to lose Title I. Also, cannot be just changed. We have a waiver right now that's good until this summer, pass this test. That waiver keeps us safe from consequences of not meeting AYP. Not getting that 95% is one of the AYP, annual yearly progress categories. So our waiver protects us from any consequences. So if the federal government were to punish New York State for not getting enough kids taking the test, they would have to pull our waiver, which I do not believe, lawyers that work with us do not believe that that would be legal for them to just pull a waiver arbitrarily. Or they would have to pass a regulation or a law stating that they could pull that money. And again, election year, Title I money goes to our neediest students and our kids in poverty, our schools in poverty. The chances of them pulling this type of thing, pulling money from our neediest schools during an election year are, I will put my house on the line and bet that they would not pull that Title I money away from those schools. If you opt out, your school will be put in receivership or put on the focus district list. That's another fabrication because we already saw this year, just recently, there was a new list that came out. They pulled a whole bunch of schools off the focus district list and off the receivership list, and some of those schools had well more than 5% opt-out. So opt-outs cannot be the factor then if those districts came off the focus list and had more than 5%. Also, I use ComSwab as an example. They're going on year 4 of some of the highest opt-out numbers in the entire state, and they are still in good standing. And they have not been put on receivership. They have not gotten any hand slaps for opt-outs. They are still, and again, going on 4 years, more than any other districts. So if it didn't happen to ComSwab yet, it will not happen to your school. Sorry, I know, it's a bad time. Also, being told if you opt your children out, they will not be prepared for future tests. I have actually had 3rd grade parents say to me, well, I want them to be prepared for the SAT. Okay, I don't know, I can't even argue with that. It's not even rational. You know, unfortunately, all of our kids get test prepped to death. So whether they actually sit for those 10 hours, I think the only thing the test does different than all the rest of the kids is that it teaches stamina.
Yep.
And I don't really think I want my elementary school kids to learn test-taking stamina yet. They're not ready for it. But that's the only difference as far as I'm concerned. If you opt out of state and local assessments, your child's teacher will not know what your child's needs are. First of all, these test results come back when your child is no longer in that class. And teachers, you know that you don't go back through the state test scores of all the other kids before you start teaching your class and say, okay, let me figure out what they need and don't need. Let me go through the state test scores. Okay, that is just not done. Local assessments also. When I've heard parents that say that they try to opt out of the local assessments like STAR, Ames Web, and MAP, especially for elementary school kids, and they will tell the administrator, I don't want them taking it. The administrator says, well, then the teacher's not going to know what your child needs. And I say, that's a red flag that a child would be determined of what they need and don't need based on computer tests. And as far as I'm concerned, I want the teacher to determine if my child needs services, if my child needs extra help, what it is my child needs. As you know, a kindergarten first, second grader, they're sitting on a computer test, clicking on a mouse, and that's going to tell the school what kind of services the kid needs. That's horrendous. So to me, that's the very reason why I wouldn't want my child evaluated on that test, because I don't want that to be the end-all, be-all for determining services. When we're talking about opt-out and why we're still doing this, again, opt-out is a means to an end. Opt-out is, we don't want to have to opt out forever. I don't want to have to keep doing all this and going every year on this. I want this stuff fixed. So what happens with opt-out is the numbers make a difference. How many makes a difference. It gives us the power to change. And it's as simple as that. And then the best byproduct is you protect children from that much testing. This year it's untimed. Potentially kids could take up to 50 hours of testing this year. Okay, they could sit every single day for all 6 days of testing through to the end of the day. That is what they are now allowed to do. Schools now have been given guidance that if they sit through lunch, they have to sit with a monitor at lunch to monitor and make sure that they're not going to discuss the test questions during lunch. So this is actually going on. This is actually something that they're preparing for. I want to end with one little quick story. I asked teachers after the test last year to tell me what it was like in their classrooms during test day, especially for the younger kids. And I got tons and tons of stories sent to me, and they were heartbreaking and awful, and some of them were really horrifically bad. I took even just the more mild ones, and I put them all together. They were all very similar, almost the same from one to the next. And I put them together and just wrote a little idea. I want to give you an idea of what it's like for these kids when they take the test. Strip away all the rhetoric, all the political battles, the union battles, all the money. What do you have left? You have a child who as young as 8 is taken into a room, stripped of the wall art and colorful learning tools by teachers and school administrators whose normally warm, jovial, and friendly behavior has been replaced by solemn looks of concern. Yes, some concern for themselves, how these children do on these assessments will be published in local papers, go on their permanent records, and can make or break their careers. But most of that concern is for that of their students, their children, whom they are charged with protecting, who are about to be thrown to the wolves. As these youngest learners take their seats, they are given stern instructions that are antithetical to a normal elementary school classroom. No speaking, no noise, no looking around, no asking for help on questions. The child begins to get nervous. This nervousness is making them feel like they have to use the bathroom. But they were just told that going to the bathroom was a really big deal. The test begins. They believe this test is very important. Their parents and teachers told them not to worry, but it doesn't matter. They know it does. They know their teacher has been preparing them for it all year. They desperately want to please their teachers and parents. They begin reading the questions. They don't understand what they are reading. They're reading passages 3 grade levels above their own. They don't understand the questions either. There seems to be 2 right answers for every question. Panic creeps in. A classmate begins crying. This causes another to cry. The teacher tries to calm them down. The teacher herself has tears in her eyes as well. An hour and a half go by while the child struggles to complete questions that were designed to fail 70% of her and her classmates. She has a special education classmate that will have to endure a grueling 3 hours or more of testing, as he has double time for testing. The test is finally over. Unfortunately, this is just one day. The The child will have to repeat this event 5 more times over the next 2 weeks. The teacher doesn't bother with normal instruction over these 2 weeks. The children just can't endure anymore. So I definitely urge you to, consider, if you haven't already, or if you haven't opted out already, to opt your children out. It's our voice. This is how we make a stand. This is how we say that all these things that have been happening, all of these things that you've heard tonight, that all these things are not okay. It's not about my kid does okay on the test, so it's fine. It's about saying all these things that are happening are not okay, and we're going to take a stand, and we're going to say something about it. So thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much. I know it's getting late, but if anybody has any questions, raise your hand, or we have some signs out in the hallway with some t-shirts for purchase, or you can pick up a refusal form if you have one, or if you know somebody that needs one. Thank you everyone for coming out. Appreciate it. Safe home.